Hey everybody, Phil from Two Forks. I wanted to make a new crosscut sled. I've got a couple of them. If you've seen any of my videos, both of you, you'll know that I got a few of them. But I don't have one that's dedicated to my Dado stack, and I don't want to run the other ones through the Dado because it makes too big of a slot, and I don't want to ruin it by doing that. So I'm going to make a dedicated one. I have this old tabletop here made out of maple that's pretty old, pretty dry, should be nice and stable. It's got a bit of a curve in it, so I'm actually going to cut it in half and run it through my planer and flatten it all out, and then I'll glue it back together, and I'll use this as the base. And I've got this cool piece of, I don't know what, pine fir something. Maybe you guys know what it is, I don't know. It's got some really nice red in it. It's good looking and thick enough. And so I'm going to use this for the top and the front and the back, sorry, of the sled. And then I got a couple pieces of maple laying around that I'll use for the runners that'll fit into the grooves on the table saw. So I got a little bit of milling to do first. That's, pretty basic stuff. You all know what that looks like. And once I get everything milled up, then I will start putting it together, and I'll show you how I do it at least, and go from there. See you in a minute. Hey everybody, I'm back. Got my parts made. This turned out to be a little tougher than I thought it was. I thought I was going to be able to cut it in half, run it through the planer, and be done with it and glue it back together. But in fact, I had to cut all the glue joints loose because maybe it sat outside or something, but they were shot. So I had to redo the whole thing. But it's fine. Turned out great. I went only 5/8 thick on this. Usually I would go 3/4 on something like this, but my Dado stack's only 8 inches diameter instead of 10. So I thought maybe I might need a little bit more or a little bit less of this, and it's fine. The only regret is that when I went to put this track in, because I wanted to be like all the cool guys with a track in their sled, I realized that after I cut it out that I only have about 3/16 here to screw into. So I glued this in really well, screwed it in with some cabinet hinge screws, and then I had to cut the bottoms of the screws off because they protruded through the bottom. But no harm, no foul. I think it'll be fine. I just won't crank down too hard on this thing, even though I think even if I did, I don't think it would pull out. Threads are pretty strong. So I got that. Had some beach laying around. I made these glides, and they're countersunk, obviously, so that the screws don't drag on the table. And I didn't make these super, super tight because here in New England, we get so much humidity and expansion and contraction that in the summer I wouldn't be able to push them through. In the winter, they'd be all sloppy. So I just try and find the happy medium and go for that. So next thing I want to do is try and attach these runners onto the table. All right. So I've got contact adhesive on these guys. I use this 3M Super 77. It's a Super 77. 77, 78, whatever it takes. Hopefully it's going to work. I've got it on my runners. I taped it off first so I didn't adhere my board down onto my table. So I got where my runners are going to be. And what I did here, let's turn around the right way, is I got my fence set up exactly where I want my blade to come through on this. And this is nice and square. It's all nice and square. So I'm just going to sort of put it up against the fence nice and square, and then put it exactly where I want it and make sure the runners are where they need to be. And then I'm going to plop it down on here. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it sticks. This is nice and tight up against the fence, so this whole thing should be nice and square, which is what you want. So this is either going to work or it's not, and it's going to be kind of embarrassing. So either way, let's check it out. Ta-da! It worked. That honestly may be the first time that something like that's ever worked for me. I usually screw these things up, so I'm happy. So now I'm just going to drill some holes in here and make sure I don't go all the way through to the face, even though I have a bunch of holes in here anyway because it's repurposed stuff. So I'm going to drill some holes. It's already been countersunk, and get these things fastened down on here. We're rolling. Okay. So we're pretty close with the runners being square to the fence. So last part to ensure that it is I got my framing square on here, tied up against the fence and tied up against our back piece. Got it nice and clamped down on here. Now I'm going to just throw screws up through the bottom and into this piece. I'm going to start with the outside. I'm not going to throw all the screws in there, and just once I screw this on, double check, triple check, make sure it's okay. If I put all of them in, then I'm going to have to, if it's not right, I'll have to re-drill all of them. It's just off by a little bit. I can pivot one side or the other. I could take the screw out, and then I just have to re-drill that one side. You can't move it and then try and go through the same hole again. It'll just pull the board right back to where it needs to go. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed again and put the ends in, and let's see how we do. It looks nice and square. Oi. I had the fence pretty tight up against it. That actually holds it in place, so it doesn't really want to move because the fence is so tight against it. So I'm going to get it out of the way and take it for a test drive. Ooh, it's got nice action. Probably because half the screws are rubbing on the bottom. Gonna have to maybe take those off. So now we just want to make sure that this fence is nice and square, and it is. It looks good. It looks pretty much dead nuts. So I'm happy with that. Should work out pretty well. So next thing, we'll throw the rest of the screws in here, and then we'll just pop the front on. The front doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything except hold. Once you run through here, obviously you have two pieces, so it just holds the two pieces together. It doesn't, in terms of square or whatever, it doesn't really make any difference. So just put it nice and flush to the front of it, and you'll be in business. So we're almost there. We're almost ready to actually cut a tenon, I think. All right, so that was a bit of an adventure. Turns out my framing square wasn't square. So as I set everything up, it set it up wrong. It was more than a little bit, which is kind of crazy because I haven't used that square out in the field, so I must have bought it and it wasn't right, which is a bummer. Anyway, I got a framing square that was right, got everything dialed in, and now we're all good. I was, as you saw, cutting the slot for the Dado stack. I'm just going with the 1/2-inch stack. That'll be good, I think, for most things that I'm going to be doing. I didn't want to go 3/4. I just decided on 1/2. But be careful when you're doing this, because now when you're going through not only the sled, but you're not only going just through the table, but also through the sled. This is probably going to be higher than you've ever had it. Like you can see here, it's up probably 1.25 inches or so, which means it's going to try and push through your insert too if you've never done it before. So that's why I was actually holding the sled down on the insert while I turned it up, and it was blowing all the, I don't know what that is, walnut up, because it was actually going through the insert also. If you turn it that much and nothing's holding it down, it's going to want to fly out. Even though there's a pin back there holding it, it still gets a little sketchy. So when you're doing it, just make sure you're holding it and cranking it up until you get to a point where you think it's satisfactory. But we're good. Everything's nice and square. I'm happy with it. It moves pretty well. So now I want to try and cut a tenon on it, which is really the reason why I did this. I have a tenoning jig, but I think this is just going to make it kind of easy. I think it's going to make it fun. And so let's try and cut a tenon with this. All right, I think we're ready to cut a tenon. So I got my blade set where I need it to be. I adjusted it using my block that I want to cut the tenon on. Just set the height where it needs to be. I set this block over here to be a stop block so that I can have the depth of the tenon just about right, and should be all good to go. I'm gonna make a pass and flip it over, make another pass with it up tight, and then I can just take these off, my cool back clamps, take those off and just start eating away at the other end. But I need this one tight up against the block to be specific. So I'm going to give that a try, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed because for some reason this hasn't been easy. It's hot, and not everything's been going my way today. So hopefully this works out. Let's see what happens. Not terrible. It's a pretty good tenon, I gotta say. It looks like it worked out better on that than it does on the tenoning jig. And it looks like the shoulders are pretty good. I mean, you want, I think they're called shoulders, I don't know, sides, whatever it is. You want those to be kind of lined up, and it looks like we got those lined up pretty good. So that seems like a success. It wasn't easy. It seemed like it worked out pretty good. So I'm going to cut a little bit of this off and a little bit of this off, because that's the size of the mortise that I've cut. And I'll do that on the bandsaw. That'll be easy peasy. And then I think we should be good. All right, I'll cut my little edge off of here. Now let's see how she fits. Yowzers. It's actually not terrible. I'd go so far as to say that's pretty good. I could sit her down in there a little further, but I'm going with success. I like that. Like I said, I've cut a lot of these with my tenoning jig, and for some reason, maybe my jig's not set up right or something, but something always seems to be not quite right. This came out really well. Definitely pleased with that. I have absolutely no use for this, but I think I'm going to find something. Maybe I'll put another one over here, and I don't know what, but worked out pretty well. Now, when you're cutting those mortises, they don't have to be, you know, so tight, and it doesn't have to go right to the bottom. I don't mind if there's a, not slop, but just a little bit of friction, but not, you don't have to beat it in, because it leaves areas for glue, and I think that's probably important. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to say this was fun to make, but it wasn't. I didn't have a faulty square and every other problem under the sun, it would have been. It is a fun thing to do, so go ahead and do it. Be creative when you make your back. Do whatever you want to do. Bling it out as much as you need to bling it out. But just having one crosscut sled dedicated for the Dado stack, I think it's something that I am glad that I did, even though it was a bit of a hassle. But I hope you do it. Obviously, if you just want to make a crosscut sled, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be the Dado stack. It's the exact same procedure. So go for it. These things are super handy. You can make them a little bit bigger, whatever you want to do. But it's just a couple years ago when I made my first one of these. It had been, I don't know why it took me forever, but I'm really glad that I did. And now I'm starting to get crazy with making a bunch of them. So hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.